The cards hit the table like gunshots, each one sealing my fate with the casual cruelty of men who'd never been anyone's daughter. My father's hands shook as he reached for another drink, ice clinking against glass, the sound of a man drowning in his own choices. He didn't look at me. Couldn't. Or wouldn't. The distinction didn't matter anymore. Across the table sat a man who wore power like other people wore cologne. Expensive. Unavoidable. Suffocating. His suit was dark as midnight, his eyes darker still, and when he looked at me, it wasn't with hunger. It was assessment. Like I was a horse he was considering buying, checking my teeth, my worth, my breaking point. She's young. His voice cut through the smoke-filled room, through the desperate laughter of other gamblers who were relieved it wasn't their daughters on the auction block tonight. How old? 17. My father's voice cracked. 18 next month. Close enough. The man's fingers drummed the table, a rhythm that matched my racing heartbeat. The debt is 40,000. You're short by 38. What makes you think she's worth that gap? I stood against the wall of the underground casino, arms wrapped around myself like I could hold my pieces together through sheer will. The basement reeked of desperation and expensive whiskey, of dreams that came to die beneath fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped insects. Around us, men in various states of ruin watched the negotiation with the detached interest of people grateful someone else was bleeding tonight. My father finally met my eyes. Just for a second, and in that second, I saw everything. The apology he'd never speak. The shame that wouldn't change anything. The weakness that had brought us here, to this moment, to this transaction where his daughter became currency. She's smart. He was selling me. Actually selling me with a pitch like I was livestock. Loyal. Does what she's told. Never causes trouble. Loyal to you? The man's laugh was sharp. The father gambling her freedom away? That loyalty's worth nothing. I should have run. Should have screamed. Should have fought. Should have done anything except stand there absorbing every word like blows I'd learned to take without flinching. But I'd learned something living with my father. Sometimes survival meant staying still. Sometimes the only power you had was in how you endured. The man stood slowly. He moved like violence barely contained, like danger wrapped in expensive fabric. When he approached me, every instinct screamed to back away. I held my ground. I'd learned that too. Retreat just made predators chase. He stopped close enough that I could smell his cologne, could see the precise line of his jaw, could count the seconds my life was being weighed and measured. Up close, he was younger than I'd thought. Maybe 30, maybe less. Hard to tell when someone wore authority like armor. What's your name? Not asked to my father. To me, like I was a person instead of property. The surprise of it almost broke my careful composure. Rachel. The word came out steady, stronger than I felt. Rachel. He repeated it, testing the weight. I'm James. And your father owes me money he'll never have. Money he's been borrowing for 6 months, while promising returns that never materialized. His gaze never left mine. So now he's offering you as payment. Do you understand what that means? I understood perfectly. Understood it in the way my stomach twisted. In the way my hands went numb. In the way the future I'd been barely holding on to disintegrated like smoke. Yes. And do you have an opinion on being traded like property? The question surprised me. No one had asked my opinion on anything in years. Does it matter? It might. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Not kindness exactly, but not cruelty either. Answer the question. I looked at my father, slumped at the table, already pouring another drink like the transaction was complete. Looked at the men surrounding us, hungry for entertainment, for someone else's tragedy to make theirs feel smaller. Looked back at James, this stranger who held my future in his perfectly manicured hands. I think, I said slowly, choosing each word like selecting weapons, that men who gamble away their daughters shouldn't be surprised when those daughters stop considering them fathers. Silence fell heavy and complete. My father's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. The watching men leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. And James, this dangerous man with his expensive suit and careful control, smiled. Not cruel. Not kind. Something in between that I couldn't name. Good answer. He turned back to my father. The debt is cleared. She comes with me. Tonight. Now. You don't contact her. Don't look for her. Don't ever pretend you have a claim to her again. Understood? My father nodded, relief flooding his features. Relief. He was relieved to be rid of me. Relieved to escape consequences. Relieved that his cowardice had been rewarded instead of punished. James extended his hand toward me. Not grabbing. Offering. The distinction felt important. Come. Unless you'd rather stay with him. I took his hand. Not because I trusted him. Not because I thought this would be better. But because staying was death, slow and certain, and leaving was at least a chance at something different. Even if different meant dangerous. His grip was firm, warm, nothing like my father's. He led me through the casino, past tables where fortunes died quiet deaths, past men who wouldn't meet my eyes because looking might mean acknowledging what they'd witnessed, upstairs that creaked under our weight, through a door that opened onto night air that tasted like freedom and terror mixed together. A car waited. Black, expensive. Windows tinted dark enough to hide secrets. Two men stood beside it, dressed like James, watching everything with the careful attention of people paid to notice threats. They nodded respectfully as we approached, opened the door without question, without judgment, like escorting purchased girls was routine. I slid into leather seats that probably cost more than everything I owned. James settled beside me, close but not touching, present but not threatening. The door closed with a solid thunk that sounded like a cell door locking. Or opening. I couldn't tell which. Where are we going? My voice sounded small in the expensive silence. Somewhere safe. His answer revealed nothing. Somewhere your father can't reach. Somewhere you can breathe, without wondering when the next crisis will hit. Why? Why? The question burst out before I could stop it. Why would you do that? You could have. I couldn't finish. Couldn't name all the things men did to girls they purchased like property. Could have what? His voice was gentle but firm. Treated you like an object? Used you and discarded you? Is that what you think I am? I don't know what you are. Honesty felt dangerous but necessary. I just know you paid $40,000 for me. People don't do that without expecting something in return. Smart. He approved. You're right. I do expect something, but not what you're imagining. The car moved through the city, through neighborhoods that shifted from desperate to prosperous with each mile. Streetlights painted moving shadows across James's face, making him look almost unreal. A figure from a story instead of the man who'd just bought my freedom. Or my prison. I still couldn't tell which. Then what? I pressed. What do you want from me? He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the passing city like it held answers. When he finally spoke, his voice carried weight I hadn't heard before. I want you to survive, and then I want you to decide what comes after survival. The words settled into my chest, heavier than threats, more dangerous than demands, because they implied I had a choice. And I'd learned that choices were luxuries people like me didn't get to have. The car pulled up to a building that reached toward the sky like it was trying to escape the earth entirely. Glass and steel and money. So much money it hurt to look at. The kind of place I'd only seen in magazines, in lives that existed in a different universe than mine. This is where you live? Connovley. The question came out odd despite my best efforts to sound unimpressed. This is where we both live now. He stepped out, waited for me to follow. Top floor. The penthouse is secure, private. No one gets in without my permission. I followed because what else could I do? Through doors held open by uniformed men who nodded like I belonged, into an elevator with mirrors that reflected a girl I barely recognized. Dirty clothes, tangled hair, eyes too old for my face. I looked like exactly what I was. Broken. Used up. Sold. The elevator opened directly into an apartment that stole my breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Furniture that looked like art. Space that felt impossible after years crammed in a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like my father's failure. This was wealth beyond imagining. Power made visible. Your room is down that hall. James gestured without looking at me. Everything you need is there. Clothes, bathroom, privacy. The door locks from the inside. You're not a prisoner, Rachel. You're... What? I turned to face him. What am I if not a prisoner? He met my eyes, and for the first time I saw something vulnerable beneath the control. Someone I'm giving a chance to become whatever you choose. I wanted to believe him. God. I wanted to believe him so badly it physically hurt. But belief required trust, and trust required evidence I didn't have. And if I choose to leave, then you leave. Simple. Absolute. But I'd suggest waiting until morning. The city's dangerous at night for girls alone. He moved toward a different hallway, leaving me standing in all that luxury. All that space. All that possibility. At the entrance to his wing, he paused. Rachel? I meant what I said. The door locks from inside. You're safe here. From me, from your father, from everyone. I promise. Then he was gone, and I was alone in a palace that felt more surreal than anything I'd ever experienced. I walked slowly to the room he'd indicated, pushed open the door to find a space bigger than my entire childhood. A bed that could fit 4 people, windows that offered the city like a gift, a bathroom with marble and mirrors and products I didn't know the names for. I locked the door, tested it twice, then 3 times. Then I sat on the edge of that impossible bed and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. Terror, relief, confusion, hope. They crashed through me in waves that left me gasping. What had just happened? Who was James really? And why did being purchased feel more like being rescued? I didn't have answers. But for the first time in longer than I could, remember, I had a locked door between me and danger. I had space to breathe without fear. I had a moment to exist without bracing for impact. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd had this morning. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough to start building something from the ruins. The shower ran hot enough to burn. I stood under the spray until my skin turned red, until I'd scrubbed away every trace of that casino, that transaction, that moment when I stopped being my father's daughter and became something else entirely. The bathroom filled with steam, and I let it. Let it cloud the mirrors so I didn't have to see the girl I'd become. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a towel softer than anything I'd ever owned, I found clothes laid out on the bed. Women's clothes. My size exactly. Still with tags attached. Expensive brands I recognized from store windows I'd never entered. Someone had planned this. James had known he'd be bringing me here tonight. The realization should have scared me. Instead, it made me curious. How long had he been watching? How much did he know about me? And most importantly, why did he care? I dressed slowly, choosing jeans that fit like they'd been tailored, a sweater that felt like a hug. There was a knock at my door. Soft, polite, not demanding. Rachel? Are you awake? James's voice carried through the wood, gentler than I expected. I unlocked the door but didn't open it fully. Just enough to see him, to maintain some control over this interaction. He'd changed, too, traded his suit for dark pants and a simple shirt that somehow made him look more dangerous. Less businessman, more the person he probably actually was. Hungry? He didn't push into my space. Just stood there, respectful of boundaries I hadn't known I could have. I ordered food. Figured you probably didn't eat much today. He was right. I hadn't eaten since yesterday. My stomach growled at the mention of food, betraying my attempt to seem unaffected. What kind of food? Everything. A slight smile. I didn't know what you liked, so I got options. I followed him to the kitchen, which looked like something from a cooking show. All gleaming surfaces and expensive appliances that probably cost more than a car. The island was covered in takeout containers, steam rising from dishes that smelled like heaven. This is insane. I stared at the spread. Italian, Chinese, burgers, pizza, sushi. This is enough food for 10 people. So we'll have leftovers. He handed me a plate. Eat whatever you want. As much as you want. No one's going to judge you or stop you or make you feel bad about it. The specificity of that statement made me look at him sharply. He knew. Somehow he knew about the times my father had counted every bite I took, had made me feel guilty for needing food, for taking up space, for existing. How do you know about that? I know what it's like to live with someone who uses basic needs as weapons. His voice went hard. Food, safety, affection, all of it leveraged to keep you small and controllable. I filled my plate without speaking, suddenly ravenous. We ate in silence for a while, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who understood that some things didn't need words. When I'd eaten enough to feel human again, I finally asked the question burning through me. What happens now? James set down his fork, leaned back against the counter. Now you heal. You rest. You remember what it feels like to be safe. And after that? After that, you decide. His dark eyes met mine, serious and steady. I'm not your father, Rachel. I'm not going to control your life or dictate your choices, but I will offer you options you didn't have before. What kind of options? Suspicion crept into my voice. Nothing came free. Everything had a price. Education, training, purpose. He counted them on his fingers. I run businesses, Rachel. Legitimate ones mostly. Some that exist in gray areas. I need people I can trust. People who understand loyalty because they've seen betrayal up close. You want me to work for you? Not a question. A clarification. Eventually, if you want. He pushed off the counter, moved to the window overlooking the city. But first, I want you to become someone strong enough that you never have to depend on anyone again. Not me. Not anyone. The words hit different than I expected. Not threatening. Liberating. Why? I moved to stand beside him, staring out at the lights below. Why would you spend $40,000 on me just to make me independent? He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old pain. Because someone did it for me once. When I was younger, angrier, about to make choices that would have destroyed me, someone saw potential instead of problems and gave me a chance I didn't deserve. He turned to face me. I'm paying it forward. What if I'm not worth it? The question escaped before I could stop it, revealing the fear I carried in my bones. What if you invest all this and I fail? Then you fail. Simple. Matter of fact. Failure's not permanent unless you decide it is. And even then, even if you spectacularly crash and burn, at least you'll have had the chance to try. That's more than most people get. I studied him in the city lights. This man who'd bought my freedom like purchasing coffee, trying to understand his angle, his agenda, his real motivation. Because people didn't just help. Not in my experience. There was always a catch, always a price, always a moment when the kindness revealed itself as manipulation. What do you get out of this? I asked bluntly. Really? What's your benefit? His smile was sharp. Maybe I get someone loyal. Someone who understands that loyalty is earned, not bought. Someone who'll stand beside me because they chose to, not because they're afraid not to. He paused. Or maybe I just get to sleep at night knowing I didn't become the kind of man who treats people like property. The honesty in his voice made something crack in my chest. This wasn't a game to him. This wasn't manipulation dressed as kindness. He actually meant it, every word. And that terrified me more than any threat could have. I don't know how to trust people. The admission felt like peeling back skin. My father taught me that people who claim to care are just waiting for the right moment to use you. Then don't trust me. James moved back to the kitchen, started putting away leftovers. Trust actions instead of words. Watch what I do. Test boundaries. Push back when something feels wrong. And if I ever make you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, you tell me immediately. And then what? I helped him clean up, needing something to do with my hands. You'll just stop? Change your behavior because I asked? Yes. No hesitation. Because that's what decent people do, Rachel. They respect boundaries. They value consent. They understand that power without responsibility is just tyranny dressed up pretty. We cleaned in silence, and I found myself studying him in glances. The way he moved, efficient but not rushed. The way he'd created space for me to feel safe without demanding gratitude. The way he talked about power like it came with obligations instead of just privileges. I want to learn. The words came out quiet but determined. Whatever you're offering to teach me, I want it. All of it. I want to become someone who never has to be afraid again. His smile transformed his face. Good. We start tomorrow. Tonight. You rest. Real rest. The kind where you don't have to sleep with one ear open listening for danger. He was right. I was exhausted in ways that went deeper than physical. Tired in my bones, in my soul, in places that had been holding tension for so long I'd forgotten what relaxation felt like. James, thank you. For tonight. For this. For whatever this becomes. Don't thank me yet. His voice carried something darker. The path I'm offering isn't easy. It's going to hurt, going to push you past every limit you think you have. But if you survive it, if you push through, you'll become someone extraordinary. I believed him. Not because I was naive, but because I'd seen enough darkness to recognize someone who'd walked through it and come out the other side. James wasn't offering me rescue. He was offering me transformation. And that was worth any price. That night, I lay in that massive bed in that impossible room and stared at the ceiling, processing everything that had happened in the span of hours. My father's betrayal, the casino, James, this new life that felt more like a dream than reality. Tomorrow, everything would begin. Training, learning, becoming. But tonight, I let myself simply exist in the space between who I'd been and who I was becoming. The city hummed beyond my windows, full of lives and stories and possibilities. And for the first time in my 17 years, I felt like maybe I could be part of that instead of just surviving on the edges. Maybe I could become someone who mattered, someone strong, someone free. The thought carried me into sleep. Deep and dreamless. The kind of sleep that only came when you finally stopped holding yourself together through sheer will. 3 years changed everything. 3 years of training that broke me down and built me back stronger. 3 years of learning that pushed every limit I thought I had. 3 years of becoming someone I'd never imagined I could be. I stood in James's office now, no longer the terrified girl he'd purchased in that basement casino. My hair was pulled back severe and practical, my suit tailored to conceal the weapons I wore with casual ease, my eyes harder than they'd been at 17. I'd learned to move through the world like James did, with purpose, with power, with the absolute certainty that I belonged in spaces that used to intimidate me. The Patterson deal is done. I set the contracts on his desk, watched him review them with the careful attention he gave everything. They've agreed to our terms. Full cooperation, 20% stake in the business, quarterly reviews. James looked up, pride evident in his expression. 3 years, and that look still made something warm bloom in my chest. Not romantic exactly, something deeper. The bond between people who'd survived wars together. You handled the negotiation yourself? Every word. I settled into the chair across from him, comfortable in this space that had become as familiar as my own skin. Patterson tried to intimidate me at first. Did the whole routine about how I was too young, too inexperienced, too female to understand complex business. How'd you respond? Amusement colored his voice. He knew exactly how I'd responded. He'd taught me, after all. Reminded him that age and gender were irrelevant compared to competence. Then I systematically dismantled every argument he had until he realized resistance was expensive. I smiled, sharp and satisfied. He signed within an hour. That's my girl. The phrase held affection and respect in equal measure. You've come far, Rachel. Farther than I expected, and I had high expectations. The compliment settled warm in my chest. 3 years of work, of pushing myself past every limit, of becoming someone extraordinary. Someone my 17-year-old self wouldn't recognize. Someone my father couldn't have imagined I'd become. There's something else. I pulled out a folder I'd been carrying, set it on his desk with careful precision. I found him, my father. James's expression went carefully neutral. And he's still gambling, still drinking, still destroying himself in all the same ways. My voice remained steady, betraying none of the complexity churning beneath. He doesn't know. I know. Doesn't know I've been tracking him for 6 months. What are you planning to do? Not judgment in his voice, just curiosity. He'd taught me to think strategically, to plan carefully, to never act from emotion alone. I met his eyes. I want to buy him. The way he sold me. I want him to feel what that's like. Silence stretched between us, heavy with implications. James leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, that expression he wore when he was thinking through all possible outcomes. That's revenge, Rachel. Are you sure that's what you want? I'm sure I want justice. I'd thought about this for months, had planned every detail. I want him to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't sell your daughter and just walk away like it meant nothing. Fair enough. James stood, moved to the window that overlooked the city we'd claimed together. But revenge without purpose is just pain, creating more pain. So tell me, what's the purpose? What do you actually want from this? The question made me pause. I'd been so focused on the how that I hadn't fully examined the why. I want him to see what I became despite him. I want him to know that selling me was the biggest mistake of his pathetic life. My voice cracked slightly. I want him to feel powerless the way he made me feel powerless. Then do it. James turned back to face me. But do it smart. Don't let emotion make you sloppy. Don't let anger make you cruel. Be better than him, Rachel. That's the real revenge. His words settled into my bones, finding the truth I'd been circling. This wasn't about destroying my father. It was about proving that what he'd done hadn't destroyed me, that I'd taken his worst action and transformed it into the catalyst for becoming extraordinary. I need your help. The admission didn't come easy. 3 years of independence made asking for help feel like weakness. I need access to the casino where he still gambles. Need leverage over the people he owes. Need the resources to make this happen without it being traced back to me. You have them. No hesitation. Whatever you need, it's yours. You've earned it 100 times over. I nodded, stood, moved toward the door. At the threshold, I paused. James? Thank you. For everything. For buying me, for training me, for seeing something in me when I was nothing. You were never nothing. His voice was firm. You were potential waiting for opportunity. I just provided the opportunity. Everything else? That was all you. The words carried me through the rest of the day, through meetings and negotiations and the 100 small decisions that came with running an empire. Because that's what I did now. I wasn't just James's assistant or his protege. I was his partner, his equal, someone who commanded respect through competence rather than fear. The plan came together over the next 2 weeks. Careful, precise, designed to give my father exactly what he'd given me. A choice that wasn't really a choice. A transaction where his worth was measured in currency and found lacking. I walked into that same basement casino on a Tuesday night, dressed in a suit that cost more than my father's car. The place hadn't changed. Same desperate energy, same flickering lights, same smell of dreams dying slow deaths. But I had changed. Everything about me was different. Stronger, harder, unbreakable. My father sat at the same table where he'd sold me 3 years ago. Older now, more beaten down by life and choices. He didn't recognize me at first. Why would he? I'd been a scared girl in dirty clothes. Now I was power wrapped in silk and steel. I sat down across from him, placed a stack of cash on the table. His eyes went wide, that familiar greed lighting up his face like a neon sign. Who are you? Someone with a proposition. I kept my voice neutral, stripped of any identifying features. I hear you have debts. 45,000 this time. That's quite an increase from 3 years ago. He squinted at me, trying to place me, to understand why I looked familiar. Do I know you? You did once. I leaned back, let him study my face. Before you traded me like property to clear your debts. The color drained from his face as recognition crashed through him. Rachel? Hello, Dad. The word tasted like poison. Surprised to see me? Surprised I'm not dead or destroyed or broken beyond repair? He tried to stand. I gestured. and two of James's men appeared from the shadows, blocking his exit. Not threatening, just present. Reminders that this conversation would happen on my terms. What do you want? His voice shook. Fear. Good. He should be afraid. I want to buy you. I spoke clearly, making sure everyone in the casino heard. The way you sold me. 45,000 to clear your debts. In exchange, you work for me. Do what I say. Go where I tell you. Become my property the way you made me yours to sell. That's insane. He looked around wildly. That's not how it works. I'm your father. You stopped being my father the night you gambled me away. My voice remained steady, cold as winter. Ice. Now you're just a man with debts he can't pay. And I'm someone offering a solution. Take it or leave it. I could see him calculating. See the gears turning in his alcohol-soaked brain. He owed money to people far more dangerous than me. People who wouldn't just make him work off his debts. People who would break him in ways that didn't heal. What would I have to do? The question was surrender before he'd even fought. Whatever I need. I didn't elaborate. Let him imagine. Let him feel the uncertainty, the powerlessness, the terror of having his life controlled by someone else's whims. Starting with getting sober, getting clean, becoming someone useful instead of this pathetic thing you've become. His face crumbled. Shame and fear and the beginning of understanding. I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm so sorry. I was desperate, and I didn't know what else to do. Desperate? The word came out sharp as broken glass. You were desperate, so you sold your daughter? Let me tell you about desperate, Dad. Desperate was being 17 and terrified, not knowing if the man who bought me would kill me or use me or destroy me. Desperate was having to completely reinvent myself because my own father valued whiskey more than his child. Tears tracked down his face, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, nothing. He'd become irrelevant. A problem to be solved rather than a person who mattered. Do we have a deal? I pushed the money across the table. Or do I leave you to the people you actually owe, because they won't be as generous as I'm being? He took the money with shaking hands. What happens now? Now you come with me. I stood, gestured for him to follow. Now you learn what it's like to have your life completely controlled by someone else. Now you discover if you're strong enough to survive the transformation I'm offering. We walked out of that casino together, but we weren't family. We were creditor and debtor, powerful and powerless, the one who survived, and the one still drowning. The city stretched around us, indifferent to our drama, full of other stories, other pain, other transformations happening in the shadows. James was waiting in the car. He looked at my father, then at me, reading everything in my expression. This is what you wanted? This is justice. I slid into the seat beside him. He gets the same chance you gave me. The chance to become better or destroy himself completely. His choice. My father climbed into the car, silent and shaking, probably realizing for the first time what he'd actually done 3 years ago. What it felt like to be property. What it meant to have your future determined by someone else's choices. We drove through the city I'd come to own, past the building where I'd learned to be strong, toward whatever came next. I'd gotten my revenge, but it tasted different than expected. Not sweet, not satisfying, just necessary. A chapter closed. A wound finally cleaned. How do you feel? James asked, quietly. Like I've finished something important. I stared out at the passing lights. Like maybe now, I can finally let go of who I was and fully become who I am. And who is that? I smiled, sharp and certain. Someone extraordinary. The months that followed proved I was right. My father, forced into sobriety and structure, slowly began resembling a human being instead of a disaster. He worked in one of our warehouses, doing inventory and manual labor that built character through necessity. He was clean for the first time in a decade, and while we'd never be family again, he was alive, functional. A cautionary tale with a better ending than he deserved. I rose higher in James's organization, my reputation growing with each successful deal, each careful negotiation, each display of the strength I'd built from ruin. People spoke my name with respect now, with the kind of careful admiration reserved for people who commanded power through competence. On the anniversary of the night, My father sold me. James called me into his office. I expected another assignment, another challenge, another test. Instead, he gestured to the chair across from his desk. 3 years ago, I paid $40,000 for you. He began without preamble. Best investment I ever made. You've said that before. I settled into my seat, curious where this was going. This time I mean it differently. He pulled out documents, slid them across the desk. I'm making you a full partner. Equal stake in everything. Equal say in all decisions. Equal share of the profits. I stared at the contracts, mind racing through implications. Why? Because you've earned it. Simple. Absolute. Because this empire we've built together is as much yours as mine. Because you've proven that investing in people creates better returns than controlling them. The papers blurred slightly as unexpected emotion hit me. 3 years ago, I'd been worth $40,000 to a desperate father. Now I was being offered 50% of a business worth millions. The reversal was almost poetic. I don't know what to say. True vulnerability broke through my careful control. Say yes. James smiled. Say you'll continue being brilliant and terrifying and extraordinary. Say you'll keep building this with me. Yes. The word came out fierce. To all of it. We shook hands, sealing a partnership that had been 3 years in the making. Two people who understood that power shared was power multiplied. Two survivors who'd learned that the best revenge was building something so magnificent that the past became irrelevant. That evening, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, watching the city pulse with life below. Somewhere out there, my father was probably in his small apartment, sober and working, living a life I'd forced him into. Somewhere out there, the casino still ran, still destroyed desperate people, still traded in misery and hope. But up here, I was free. Really free. Not just physically, but emotionally. Free from the rage that had driven me. Free from the need to prove anything to anyone. Free to simply be extraordinary, because that's who I'd chosen to become. James joined me, handed me a glass of wine. We stood in comfortable silence, two people who'd learned to read each other without words. Any regrets? He asked quietly. I thought about it. Really thought. About the girl I'd been, the woman I'd become, the journey between them paved with pain and transformation. No. Every horrible thing that happened made me who I am. And I like who I am. Good. He raised his glass. To survival. To more than survival. I clinked my glass against his. To thriving. We drank as the sun set over the city we'd claimed, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility. The past was done. The present was ours. And the future? The future was whatever we chose to make it. And I chose extraordinary.